How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean, by providence impoverished and squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar?
Alexander Hamilton, America's youngest founding father, has been thrust into the spotlight more than 200 years after his death with the unprecedented success of Lin-Manuel Miranda's 2015 hip-hop musical Hamilton. The cross-cultural sensation has a massive fan base and was nominated for a record 16 Tony Awards in 2016. At the heart of Miranda's musical is the fact that Hamilton, a bastard orphaned immigrant from the Caribbean, clawed his way up from nothing to become one of America's most influential individuals. He was handsome, driven, and eloquent. From a linguistic perspective, he was a gifted writer and orator with a firm command of both English and French, which proved useful in his many diplomatic endeavors. Interestingly, and not widely known, it is more than likely that Alexander Hamilton spoke at least one more language that would have truly set him apart from his contemporaries: St. Kitts Creole, the lingua franca of his childhood hometown in Nevis, a tropical island in the Caribbean. In fact, President John Adams, one of Hamilton's political adversaries, called him a Creole bastard on more than one occasion, referencing not only Hamilton's geographical origins, but perhaps also his unique linguistic roots. Alexander Hamilton was born in Charleston, Nevis, in 1755 at the height of sugar production and slave trade on the fertile tropical island. His mother and father were unmarried when Hamilton and his brother were born, and his father left the family when he was 10. 2 years later, his mother passed away. But before such woe befell young Hamilton, he lived in relative comfort, as his mother had inherited some property, including a few slaves, from her parents upon their deaths. According to biographer Ron Chernow, who wrote the book upon which Miranda based his musical, Hamilton's family, quote, clung to the insecure middle rung of West Indian life, squeezed between plantation aristocrats above and street rabble and unruly slaves below, unquote. The family resided in a crowded part of town that had 59 houses with 187 whites and 427 slaves, making it quite reasonable to infer Hamilton was in constant close contact with not just his family's slaves, but also other slaves and residents who frequented his family's store and later the shipping company he clerked for before coming to New York City. Hamilton's family's socioeconomic status in Nevis is significant because it put him in a position that likely necessitated he be able to speak the lingua franca of the island, St. Kitts Creole, in order to communicate with the majority of the people with whom he came in contact. But what is a Creole language anyway? A Creole language emerges as the result of a contact situation in which there is no lingua franca or common language that people can use to communicate. In Nevis, which was colonized by the British in 1623, English was spoken by most of the wealthy plantation owners, but they were in the minority. Slaves from the African diaspora as well as European indentured servants were brought in droves to work on the sugar plantations. With so many different languages being spoken, residents needed a common language in order to efficiently run the plantations, participate in trade, and communicate in general. And so St. Kitts Creole was born. As an English lexified Creole, it shares many characteristics of other Caribbean Creoles, including Jamaican patois. But just because St. Kitts Creole is English lexified does not mean it's merely a dialect of English. In fact, it is its own complete language that merely borrows a large portion of its word bank from the English of its original colonizers. Meanwhile, the languages of European indentured servants and the many languages of African slaves, including some type of pidgin English forged in the contact situation between West Africans and Europeans, form the basis of St. Kitts Creole's grammar. The result? A brand new, unique language that can be used by the community to communicate effectively and efficiently. Though the St. Kitts Creole of today sounds quite different than what Hamilton likely spoke, it is nonetheless still a unique language that Nevisians to this day take pride in speaking, though they almost all speak standard English now too. In this tourism video for St. Kitts and Nevis, we hear a little bit of the Creole as well as the Caribbean accent of the native speaker.
When you want to say that you don't know, you never say you don't know. The word that you would use would be, me no know. That means I don't know. When you want to say you're hanging out in St. Kitts, you never ever say you're hanging out. People won't understand you. What you have to say is, we're liming. Then everyone understands you, because liming in St. Kitts is hanging out.
St. Kitts Creole is a highly analytic language, meaning it conveys grammatical relationships without using inflectional morphemes. For example, words that are plural or past tense are not indicated by adding an S or an ED at the end of the word, respectively. So instead of saying, he will eat 2 mangoes, one might say, Igo ate 2 mango. Vowels in St. Kitts Creole also shift farther back, so go would become go and eat would become it. Speakers drop word final R's too, so that words like car and sister would be ka and sista. V is also consistently replaced with B, and L is replaced by R or N when L isn't the first sound of the word. So never and dollar would be pronounced neba and donna. In consonant clusters that start with S, such as speak and story, the S drops off and they are pronounced peak and tori. And the interdental fricatives of th and th are lost to t and d. So thief would become teef and them would become dem. Another trait of St. Kitts Creole is the zero copula, so instead of saying he is sweet, they would drop the is and say e sweet. Speakers also use the copula been to indicate past tense, so before time you no been good would mean previously you weren't good. The language also makes use of an all-purpose negator, no, as in the previous before time you no been good. These are just some of the many phonological, morphological, and syntactical traits that define St. Kitts Creole. In short, it is all but certain that Alexander Hamilton spoke St. Kitts Creole as a child in the Caribbean, and here are 10 reasons why. Nevis was colonized by the British in 1623. Nevis and its sister island of St. Kitts were home to numerous sugar plantations in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. These plantations relied on slave labor and indentured servants. These workers and residents required a lingua franca in order to communicate. The contact situation gave birth to St. Kitts Creole to meet this communication need. Alexander Hamilton was born in Nevis in 1755. He grew up there during the height of the sugar and slave trades. His family was middle class, owned a small number of slaves, and lived in a densely populated area. Hamilton would have been in constant contact with his family's slaves as well as other local slaves and workers who spoke St. Kitts Creole.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, number 10 paces, fire!
President Adams himself called Hamilton a Creole bastard. Hamilton's childhood home still stands in Charleston, Nevis. Tourists can visit and listen to the locals speaking in the lingua franca of the sister islands, a language likely spoken more than 2 centuries ago by one of America's founding fathers.
Who tells your story?